Hey, everybody, this is Joe Joseph, and this is the Sheeple.com's Daily News Brief. This is part 3 of my continuing series, A Brief History of the New World Order. And today, we start off with the year 1889, specifically July 14th, 1889, where we meet again Albert Pike, again, a gentleman that has a statue right in the center of Mordor, Washington, D.C. And I think you'll find this very interesting because, again, this speaks to why it's so important to them to remove God or slant spirituality from society in order to control you. Listen to this. It says, Albert Pike on July 14th, 1889, issued instructions to the 23 Supreme Councils of the world. And here he reveals who is the true object of Masonic worship. It says, quote, "To you, Sovereign Grand Instructor Generals, we say this, that you may repeat it to the brethren of the 32nd, 31st, and 30th degrees. The Masonic religion should be, by all of us initiates of the high degrees, maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine." Now, we know and we understand through a lot of research that there is a darkness in behind the scenes in high society, if you will. You can take a look at Bohemian Grove. You'll see a lot of our politicians and a lot of people from Hollywood and a lot of billionaires and millionaires that converge on Bohemian Grove every year to take part in the cremation of care ritual. If you take a look at some books, such as the Franklin Cover-Up, you will read about rampant pedophilia happening both in the White House, happening at Bohemian Grove, and other places. You know, a very eyes wide shut type of environment. Makes you wonder, what exactly did Kubrick know when he made that movie? But right here, Albert Pike, in his own words, comes out and tells you, look, the Masonic religion is Luciferian. Doesn't get any more black and white than that, folks. Let's go to 1890. This to 1896. Cecil Rhodes, you may know his name, an enthusiastic student of John Ruskin. He's the Prime Minister of South Africa, a British colony at the time, and he's able to exploit and control the gold and diamond wealth of South Africa. And he works to bring all the habitable portions of the world under the domination of a ruling elite. To that end, he uses a portion of his vast wealth to establish the famous Rhodes Scholarship. Now, this, my friends, is where they get the blueprint later on. The endowments get the blueprint in order to hijack the U.S. education system. See, they learned this from Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes goes ahead, he develops the Rhodes Scholarship. Let me handpick people from academia or from, high school. Let me pick out these people that we are going to bring about to bring our next generation of control freaks along. And so that's what the Rhodes Scholarship is all about. It's about kind of like a indoctrination, if you will, a coddling, a nurturing of talent that brings about your next generation of control freaks. Now, here's a bonus for you. Yale University's Order of the Skull and Bones, where 3 threads of American social history, espionage, drug smuggling, and secret societies intertwine all into one. Skull and Bones is the American branch of the Illuminati. National and global events are manipulated as part of a grand Hegelian equation, thesis and antithesis, yielding a new world order synthesis. And yes, my friends, in case you were wondering, George W.F. Hegel was a member of Skull and Bones. Now, if you didn't know some people who were in Skull and Bones or on the Skull and Bones roster, why, you had Lord Whitney, you had Lord Whitney, Taft, you had Jay, you had Bundy, you had the Harriman family, the Rockefellers, Goodyear, Sloans, the Stimpsons, okay, Phelps, Perkins, the Pillsburys, the Kelloggs, the Vanderbilts, the Bushes. Let's not forget those Careys. And of course, the list goes on and on. In 1911, the Socialist Party, now remember, Communism got rebranded in the late 19th century as socialism in the West. So where communism, and you could go about calling it communism, say in the new Soviet Republic or, down in Cuba, present day Cuba, you could call that communism and you could get away with it. In the West, communism had already got a bad rap, so they had to remodel it, remold it. And the socialist label is what came out. In 1911, the Socialist Party of Great Britain publishes a pamphlet entitled Socialism and Religion, in which they clearly state their position on Christianity. This is what they wrote, quote, "It's therefore a profound truth that socialism is the natural enemy of religion. A Christian socialist is in fact an anti-socialist. Christianity is the antithesis of socialism." Now, I want everybody to take that in because there's a lot of people out there who are socialist and Christian at the same time. As a matter of fact, they often say, well, wasn't Jesus a socialist? No, Jesus was not a socialist. Jesus believed in free will. Jesus did not believe in oppressing people with their beliefs or forcing their beliefs, his beliefs, on anybody else. As a matter of fact, he kind of went on and loved people regardless of their belief. Something that we should do. He even went on to say, look, fellers, you got to understand. See, Jesus was, whether you believe him or not, whether you think he existed or not, if you take a look at his life based on what's written, you can make an argument that he was probably the most powerful activist to ever walk the face of the earth. At a minimum, you take God incarnate aside, put it aside, and just let's call him a human being. Here's Jesus, the human being. He effected more social change in a very short period of time than anybody else that ever walked the face of the earth. And here he is. He comes in and he says, hey, look, you had 10 commandments and understand humanity. You're having a hard time. You're having a hard time grasping the whole 10 commandment thing. So let me just boil it down to 2 for you. Because if you can do these 2 things, by God, you can get all 10. He says, let me make it simple. Love each other. Okay? Love each other. Just unconditional love. That means respect people for their differences. We don't all have to think the same way or do the same things. We can respect and love each other. See, if you love each other, you're going to respect one another out of love. And so if you do those 2 things, right? If we practice unconditional love and personal responsibility, the whole control structure comes crashing down. If everybody just did that, they couldn't pawn wars on us. They couldn't use us against one another. Divide and conquer wouldn't work. Nothing would work. It would just chink off our armor. Done. They would instantly lose control. So, remove God from society, and a lot of people then what? Put their faith in who? A government God, who is exactly what socialists and communists want to manage and control everything. They are all in favor for a strong central government that basically calls out for across-the-board equality, which you can make an argument for, hey, things aren't fair. You're right, things aren't fair. But whoever said life was fair? Whoever said that everybody was going to be equal? Take a look at human history and tell me, is that the case? And even if, let's just say, for example, Bernie Sanders was elected president, do you think he would have any more easygoing than a President Trump right now? I don't think so. I think you would have just as much, if not more, a backlash with a Bernie Sanders as you would a Donald Trump. Because each of them are at their extreme ends of their political spectrum. So yeah, the Socialist Party created in Great Britain, their Socialist Party, created in 1911. Now, in 1912, Colonel Edward Mandell House. Now, I want everybody to remember this name because this guy here is one of the handful of people I credit with the downfall of humanity. Okay? He and Edward Bernays are probably like two generals. I mean, they are that high up in the food chain of screwing things up. Now, he was a close advisor to President Woodrow Wilson, and he published the book Philip Drew, Administrator, in which he promotes socialism as dreamed of by Karl Marx. Not really that hard to understand, right? Because at this time, there was a big push all over the world for communism and socialism. It had really taken off then, and a lot more would follow as time goes on, albeit a lot of it under the scene, behind the scenes, if you will. Now, House is credited with this following quote. Listen to this. The plain people of this country are inveterate, and incurable hero worshippers. Oh, wait. Let me stop that again. The plain people of this country are inveterate and incurable hero worshippers. They identified this in 1912. Okay? They knew this before that happened. They knew. And here's the thing. People loved Teddy Roosevelt. They absolutely loved Theodore Roosevelt. If he had run for a third term, he would have got it. But he deferred to his friend, William Howard Taft. And Taft ran on the Republican ticket. And not prevented, but Roosevelt made the decision not to run for a third term. And only then was he kicking himself in the butt that, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. So, Colonel Edward Mandell House starts off this quote with, the plain people of this country are inveterate and incurable hero worshipers. Look at the cult of personality with President Trump. I mean, these people know what they're getting when they see these candidates come about. They understand the psychology behind it all. He continues, he says, a man with a slogan that expresses their undefined aspirations can manipulate them easily. Sound familiar? He says, we hold all American newspapers as isolated from the non-American world as if they had been on another planet instead of another hemisphere. And in 1913, on February 3rd, the 16th Amendment, conveniently enough, to the U.S. Constitution, making it possible for the federal government to impose a progressive income tax, which, by the way, is plank number 2 of the Communist Manifesto, is ratified. In Canada, the income tax is introduced in 1917 as a temporary measure to finance the war effort. And of course, was it temporary? No. Once you have a tax, and this is something that we've seen now with Obamacare, and something that is very difficult for politicians. Once they have a tax and they become addicted to that money, it's very hard for them to give it up. Because, my friends, in a world where everybody knows what's best for everybody else, government knows best how to spend your money. And they're not going to give it back easily. Okay? As much as we want to stomp and throw a fit, a tantrum, to the point where a President Trump is elected, President Trump is going to find it extremely difficult to break Congress of that addiction, of that love of money. And even if he does away with, say, the 35% business tax rate, or perhaps he cuts the middle class taxes, right? Even if he does that, you still have a president that has $10 trillion in commitments right now. That's $10 trillion of added debt over what is going to be brought in commitments that have been made by prior governments, prior Congresses, prior presidents. And then you have a president that wants to cut taxes, which will generate revenue also because it's going to make people spend more if they're not paying as much to the government. But you also have one that wants to have big increases in Homeland Security, big increases in defense spending. Where's that money going to come from? Oh, it will cut social programs. Let me tell you something. Social programs come nowhere near to the defense budget. And I'm not talking about Social Security, and I'm not talking about Medicare, because no one's going to touch that. They can say they will, but they're not going to touch it. Because that is a political football that no one wants to touch. They may extend the age out a couple of years as far as retirement, but they're not cutting Social Security, and they're damn sure not cutting Medicare. Especially the Republicans. Not happening. Now, in 1913, President Woodrow Wilson publishes The New Freedom. Now, listen to this. This is a sitting president of the United States. This is what he penned in 1913. Quote, "Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the U.S. in the fields of commerce and manufacturing are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they'd better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." And there, my friends, he speaks a lot of the control freaks, the ones behind the scenes with the money and the power, your corporatists, your oligarchs. And really, what we have today is nothing more than a return of oligarch rule that was seen in the late 19th and early 20th centuries before that was busted up. And a lot of people say that never went away, and they would be right. But Roosevelt did do what he could do. Problem is, there's always a workaround. You learn that in government. Oh, they'll come out with new regulations and policies, but don't worry, there's always a workaround. And they know this all too well. All too well. Also, on December 23rd, 1913, the Federal Reserve, certainly not federal with nothing in reserve, is created. It was planned at a secret meeting in 1910 on Jekyll Island, Georgia. Of course, you can read G. Edward Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, if you want to understand how the Federal Reserve came to be and what it's all about. It was created by a group of bankers and politicians, including Colonel House. Now, this transfers all the power to create money from the American government to a private group of bankers. The Federal Reserve Act is hastily passed just before the Christmas break. Congressman Charles A. Lindbergh Sr., father of the famed aviator, warns this, quote, "This act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When the president signs this act, the invisible government, by the money power, proven to exist by the money trust investigation, will be legalized. Will be legalized." My friends, this started the downfall of this country. 1913 was a pivotal year in United States history. Not something to be proud of, but certainly something to look at with dread. I'm Joe Joseph. This was the DailySheeple.com's Daily News Brief, Part 3 of a series, a brief history of the New World Order, and I'll have the next segment for you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.